While the nation continues to focus on election results and the control of Congress, ultimately, there is another big story unfolding in Washington, D.C.
We're talking about this week where the United States Supreme Court took up a case challenging the Indian Child Welfare Act, which is also known as ICWA. So our 9 News legal expert Whitney Traylor has been looking into this. And I guess to understand this, we really have to look back at the historical significance of the passing of ICWA. Tell us what you know.
Sure. So ICWA is a federal statute that Congress passed in 1978. And the reason was because from the late 1800s through about the 1960s, both the state and private industries were taking these Native American children and putting them into boarding schools. And the formal idea was assimilation. And so they had things that said, kill the Indian in him and save the man. They were trying to remove the child from the influence of the savage parents, that kind of thing. And so they started doing all these studies and found it was hundreds of thousands of kids, maybe a third of the children up until 1978. So they passed this statute, Congress, saying that Native American children had to be adopted either immediate family or same tribe or another tribe. So it made it more, so essentially, because they were losing their language, it was to save the culture. And now there's a family, a white family, who now has adopted a child, and now the issue is, can they adopt, or under the Indian Child Welfare Act, can they, do they have to stay on the reservation, essentially?
Yeah, we've heard so much more about this recently, and I know in Colorado alone there were these boarding schools that took away everything that was their culture back in the day. So in this case, the court is deciding what?
Right. So there's a few issues. So there's the private families, and they're saying that, hey, this is an equal protection violation. You're making this decision based on race. But in response, the government is saying, no, this is Indian. These are tribal nations. We're dealing with a political issue. So that's one issue. And then Texas is saying, well, you can't tell us, federal government, how to run our child adoption system. That's a state issue. So it's a state and federal fight, and then it's a fight of whether this is race or if it's a political distinction.
So the Supreme Court can have nuanced decisions, but normally it comes out on one side or the other. Talk about if they were to rule one way or the other, how that would have an impact.
Right, and historically they have ruled in favor of the tribal nations, saying, no, this is within your jurisdiction and we don't have that right. And so now if they do ultimately rule and say that, no, this family has that right, I think this takes away a lot of power from the tribal nations, because now you're really dealing with a jurisdictional issue. So this will lead to more litigation for sure if they rule that way. Now I read, they had oral argument for about 3 hours, and I read a lot of the comments, and Justice Gorsuch is definitely sort of on the pro-tribal nation side, if you will, historically. But there were other conservative justices that seemed to question the plaintiffs in this case, in leading to the idea they may rule in favor of the tribal nation.
Normally, can you read a lot into
what
happens in a Supreme Court argument like that?
Well, sometimes it's a little bit of forecasting. I mean, that's what everybody said on the affirmative action cases.
Right.
Even though there was 5 hours of debate, they said the way the questions were going, that you could tell. And a lot of times the justices have their minds made up beforehand. They'll even write these sort of briefs, but they'll have 1 or 2 specifics they want to get into. So a lot of times the traditional notion is when they get to oral argument, they're generally not going to be persuaded. They've sort of already made up their mind.
They've already read it and asked the one questioner.
Yeah.
Certainly one that is important not only across the country, but I think especially to people here in Colorado that have recently learned a lot more about these boarding schools.
Yeah, there's a lot at stake here. We will be following it for sure.
Yep.
Keep an eye out for ICWA.
Yeah.
All right, thanks very much. Good to see Whitney Traylor again.